All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good morning and welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Garrett Bergquist in for Phil Sanchez. President-elect Donald Trump has now filled out his cabinet, at least for the time being. His last few major nominations came in over the past few days. Jamison Greer would be the next U.S. trade representative. He served as the trade representative's chief of staff during Trump's first term. Greer would play a key role in Trump's tariff agenda. Hedge fund manager Scott Bessent is Trump's pick for Secretary of the Treasury. That's a key cabinet role that advises the president on economic and fiscal matters like spending and taxes. Bessent advised Trump on economic policy during his campaign. He once led investments at a hedge fund started by Democratic mega donor George Soros. Bessent would be fifth in the line of succession if he's confirmed. And former NFL player Scott Turner would lead the Department of Housing and Urban Development. He's served in the Texas House of Representatives. He led the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council during Trump's first term. And we should note HUD currently fully controls the Indianapolis Housing Authority. That decision followed years of operational and administrative failures at IHA. In a matter of weeks, the longest-serving superintendent in the history of the Indiana State Police will retire. It will be up to Governor-elect Mike Braun to decide who will take Doug Carter's place at the command of that agency. Carter sat down with our Dakari Turner to talk about his successes and his biggest regret from his time in command.
The enormity and the pressure of this desk is very real.
12 years after taking the helm of Indiana State Police, Doug Carter is just days away from his final time behind his desk. An exit interview of sorts, we are the first to sit down with him for this conversation. His 4-decade career in law enforcement will end when Governor-elect Mike Braun's term begins.
My entire life has been this, and I remember when I called my dad and told him I got that interview with Mike Pence for this position.
His tenure as the state's top cop lasted 2 governors and stretched through event after event. In just the first 6 months of last year, 5 members of law enforcement died while on duty. That included 2 state troopers, James Bailey and Aaron Smith. It was Carter's grim duty to present the American flags that draped the caskets to their heartbroken families. It was the 2016 deaths of 4 black girls in Florida that sent chilling ripples through Carroll County after they died in an arson that today remains unsolved.
Is that case still solvable?
Yes.
What makes you say that?
People talk about and fall back on this. I think it's an excuse of a cold case. If people are alive, it's not cold. So, to the person out there, I would say that set that fire. I would say to them, I don't believe you intended to kill those 4 beautiful little girls. I don't believe you did. Was it murder? No, I don't think it was. I think there was something else. I don't know what that something else is, but there was something else.
Still in the early stages of that investigation, another emerged. The grisly 2017 murders of Abby Williams and Libby German, the years-long search for a killer, and the subsequent murder trial of Richard Allen all happened under Carter's purview. It was not a state police case, but Carter was often the public face of that investigation.
We believe you are hiding in plain sight.
He says it still touches him deeply. Abby, Libby, and the girls who died in that fire, Kiana, Kiara, Cariel, and Keone, all written by hand and sit on Carter's desk. A judge's gag order still limits what Carter can say about the Delphi murders.
No, and I can't think of a case in our history that had gained that much attention for that length of time.
Have you run into political influence in the agency's investigations?
If I would not be sitting here if I did. I would retire that day.
Carter tells me he has also used his final years as the head of state police to push for changes in policing, sparked by the deaths of young black men at the hands of police, most notably the death of George Floyd in 2020. He wants a change in police culture.
And I got a lot of haters along the way by trying to embrace it. And what I'm talking about is the color of my skin versus the color of yours, and having those conversations with people. Because what I saw was not okay. And if you weren't a police officer after George Floyd, you don't have any idea. You don't understand.
Some people would, as you're obviously aware, look and say, what does this white man know about police reform? What does this white man know about, all of it, right? To those kind of things, what would you say?
I don't. Don't expect me to. But I want to understand the difference. We're a damaged profession, and it's going to take a while for us to climb out of that.
The microscope that law enforcement policing is under, is it deserved?
Absolutely. It's okay. We should not be ashamed of it.
Is there one thing you could point to and say, man, I'm glad I accomplished that?
Now we have a vibrant and active and alive aviation unit. Our laboratory system, we had a 45-year-old laboratory system, or the capital, the buildings, the availability of technology, the scientists were working in broom closets. I'm leaving the recruitment thing broken. I've not fixed it. And that's one of my biggest regrets. One of my biggest regrets. We have less troopers today in Indiana than we had in 1984 when I started.
In the 40 years since, Carter has had lots of time to think about what comes after he steps away. Carpentry, he says, working to carve detailed pieces of wood while retired. As we finish our conversation, he sits behind his own intricately carved desk made by the Department of Corrections. For the next person to sit here, he has these words.
For that person, what would you tell that person?
Well, I'm going to write him a letter. I'm going to leave it right here on this star and on my badge when I leave. But the crux of that letter is always care about others, not yourself. But I've never done what I knew was wrong. I have never done what I knew was wrong. I made some bad decisions, but never that I knew. Never vindictive. Never with a personal benefit in mind.
Coming up, a Northwest Indiana mayor tells us how density and walkability play into her plans to revitalize her city. Welcome back. Michigan City's mayor tells me the city's future begins with more housing and better planning. I recently made the trip to the city near the Michigan line. It's part of our series highlighting the work of Indiana's black mayors. This was once Michigan City's main train station. It's about to become much more than that.
We're working on the facade of the parking garage, but now next door you see the establishment of our foundation for our mixed-use retail and housing project called the Franklin.
Deitch worked on the project during her 4 years on the city council. Now wrapping up her first year as mayor, she says the city needs both more housing and easier access to services, especially grocery stores and childcare.
When you look at housing, we know that we have a gap. We have wonderful home daycare providers that are here, but one of the issues that they're facing is creating the workforce to work in those daycares. Everything that we think about our food desert. With our RFP at 5th and 6th in Franklin, the RFP required a grocery store.
Deitch says she has about 1,800 units of housing in the works in all. That includes everything from apartments to single-family homes. All of them will include or be located near key services. Her plans don't stop there.
This facility here was my old high school, Elston.
It currently houses a non-traditional high school, Ivy Tech programs, and the YMCA. Deitch plans to turn it into a one-stop shop. She wants to add more workforce training programs and childcare services.
I want to make sure that the families that are here feel supported and that they have the same opportunities that any new resident will have. A lot of times you hear about you're building all this housing for new people, but what we're trying to do is fill a gap for all residents.
Deitch is one of a record 9 black mayors in the state. She says she believes voters elected those black mayors because they felt they were the right person for the job.
For us, the pressure is more about what are we going to do for those areas that have not been invested in over time, which happen to be the areas where most of us as African American or black people grew up in.
Most of Deitch's projects are still in the planning phase. She's about to submit a grant application to spruce up Michigan Boulevard, and she plans to add more walkability for other parts of town.
I think it's time that every part of the city has an opportunity to be revitalized.
Coming up, Indiana's best political team takes stock of President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks and a looming trade war. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Whitley Yates and Democrat Ariel Brandy. Welcome to you both. Let's begin with the latest round of tariff threats from President-elect Donald Trump. He says he wants to impose new import duties on goods from China, Canada, and Mexico, and that's unless those countries take tougher action on the flow of drugs and migrants into the United States. Whitley, Trump just concluded a new free trade agreement with both Canada and Mexico in his first term. Could this jeopardize that deal?
I don't believe so. And when you look at the tariffs that were placed during the Trump administration and then continued through the Biden administration, nobody was complaining about how these tariffs impacted American people. So the fact that there's all this fear mongering around the new tariffs that have been proposed is really just a red herring, because the truth is, as long as these countries are able to reduce the amount of illegal immigrants coming into the country and make sure that they're not doing things that are going to really impact Americans in a negative way, impact our industries, impact our business, specifically our technology when it comes to China, they wouldn't have anything to worry about if they're not doing malicious practices against America.
Ariel, how likely is it this will lead those countries to do what Trump wants them to?
I mean, we know that the threats were going to come. I think the biggest thing is this the right direction in order for us to, put forth anything towards any type of border control? I feel like right now it's an attack on immigrants at the end of the day, and threatening these countries, especially the ones that are producing so much for Americans, I think harms us. I mean, Trump campaigned on being able to reduce inflation and to make sure that your groceries aren't high and you're not paying, so much on gas, but at the end of the day, these tariffs are going to have an impact on American families. I mean, prices are going to go up and people are going to feel that in their pockets. And unfortunately, that's going to be a campaign promise broken from Trump himself, all because he wants to be able to have a handle on immigration and no longer let migrants come into this country, because he thinks that there's so many illegal drugs and all of the immigrants are threatening and harming American people, when we know that that is not true. And those numbers have been down since the pandemic. So how is the correlation there for him to say these tariffs need to be put into place in order for us to curb immigration flow into this country? It just doesn't make sense. And threatening countries that are helping Americans and have been for a very long time, I don't think that it puts us in a good position as a country at all.
Willie, I saw you kind of shaking your head there. I'll let you respond to that.
I mean, the current administration that we have now put in no tariffs, and the cost of inflation was ridiculously high on everyday items such as eggs, cheese, and groceries. So what you can't do is say someone that's attempting to curb a problem that America is having is going to create a greater problem when the current administration has created that greater problem. We're attempting to fix the issues that have been caused specifically by the current administration through the Vacant Inflation Reduction Act that we know actually increased inflation. And so the fact that Vice President Harris was not able to secure the border, and the fact that we do have a massive illegal immigration problem in this country, and the fact that these tariffs have now caused Mexico to say, hey, we're going to slow immigration and we're going to do something about the illegal migration of our people to this country because we don't want to be impacted, is exactly what he's hoping for.
Let's move on to Trump's cabinet picks. He's nearly filled out his key staff positions now. Ariel, looking over this roster, is there anyone some Democrats might get behind, such as Marco Rubio for Secretary of State?
No, I don't think so. I think that there is a notion right now that we're just like, is he picking friends? Are these people qualified to do these jobs? I mean, when you're looking at who we have put forth right now, I think that Americans should be concerned about what this cabinet is eventually going to be able to look like, and we should have questions about it. Now, I just recently saw some polling where a lot of, the folks that voted for Trump, they feel very strongly about his picks and who he's put forth. But at the end of the day, like we're coming from a Biden administration where we have been able to see people who have been put in these positions on the cabinet that have had tremendous changes. I mean, you look at our Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, who was able to pass one of the largest infrastructure bills in our country's history that is still going to be, building and making things better for our country for years to come down the road. And now we're looking at the potential of someone having that role that was also a reality TV star. And, I'm not feeling confident in it right now. And I think the American people should be concerned because we need people in these cabinet positions that are not only qualified, but have also done some of these jobs before in their own personal and professional capacities.
Whitley, to that point, Matt Gaetz' nomination for Attorney General already got derailed over allegations of sexual misconduct. Secretary of Defense nominee Pete Hegseth faces sexual misconduct allegations as well. Should Trump have done a better job of vetting these picks?
I think it's interesting when the opposition party, which is now the Democratic Party, loses an election, all of a sudden things happening in the transition are such big deals. Did anyone have the same thought when Bill Clinton had to replace 2 of his attorney general picks? I don't think so. What about when the Obama administration had 3 withdrawals from their administration? No one said anything. What about Biden, the Biden administration? I believe it was his director of management and budget office. I want to say her name was like Neera. She was also replaced. She withdrew as well. This is what happens in transitions. You nominate people and either they will go through the process and get nominated and be selected, or they won't, or they withdraw. It's all a part of it. And while some see this disagreement as dysfunction, it's honestly part of democracy. But I really want to go back to the cabinet picks really quickly. So we have an administration right now that is touting, look at our experienced picks. Where did that experience lead America? Let's talk about the Department of Defense. Where did the experience lead us in the Afghanistan withdrawal and the Afghanistan exit? It led us to losing 13 American soldiers. It led us to losing Afghan citizens because it was completely botched and done incorrectly. And so when you have people who have done the work in both the public sector and the private sector, I think it's going to be a really good mix of people. And so you want to tout the experience of the current administration, but what has that experience done for the American people?
Here's a follow-up, though. Is Trump putting too much emphasis on personal loyalty and not enough on whether the person is actually capable of doing the job? Not necessarily so much the resume. I know you kind of already addressed that, but just generally, is he putting too much emphasis on personal loyalty as opposed to actually being capable of doing the job?
How will you know their capabilities until you get into office, see their character, and see the way that they lead? I think that the Democrats just want to have something to complain about because they're surprised that they lost the election. So they don't like the way in which he's governing. No surprise. They didn't vote for him. They don't like him. And at every step of the way, what they're going to do is lambaste him. They're going to be dissenters. They're going to tell you that all of the things that he's doing is wrong. And then when America gets back on the right track, which is what a majority of Americans voted for within this administration, they're still going to find ways to add barriers to progress.
Ariel, I'll let you jump in on this as well. We've got about 90 seconds left.
Yeah, at the end of the day, while majority of the American people might have voted for Trump to be able to be in office, we didn't know who his cabinet picks were going to be. And unfortunately, some of them are just not qualified for it. Yes, Democrats lost, but guess what? We still care about this country and how it's going to be ran moving forward. And so we want qualified people to be able to do that. And we think that when we formed our cabinet for the Biden administration, we were able to deliver that for the American people. And I hope that Trump can do the same. Unfortunately, it's not looking that way right now.
All right, I got a little over a minute left here.
Let's see.
All right, I've got a little over a minute left here. I want to briefly turn to state politics. At the beginning of the show, we heard an interview with outgoing State Police Superintendent Doug Carter. He will retire when the next administration takes office here in Indiana. Briefly, from both of you, what should Governor-elect Mike Braun look for in the next superintendent of the Indiana State Police? Ariel, you go first. 30 seconds.
Whew, this is such a dicey topic, but I mean, at least the man admitted where he was wrong and where he was right. And I'm hoping that with these new changes, with Braun coming in and him wanting to restructure, hopefully this will give our state some much renewed refreshing in our government to where we can actually get some stuff done and see these departments deliver on their promises for Hoosier people.
Whitley, take us home. 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the restructuring of the State House and the cabinet positions. I'm excited that we're going to have secretaries similar to Florida. When it comes to Doug Carter and his service, I want to thank him for all that he has done and put in to make sure Indiana remains safe. And I am sure that whoever Braun picks to lead this agency will continue to do that work.
All right. Thank you both. We will be back after a moment. Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And be sure to check out the All Indiana Politics podcast. It's online at our website, wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.